Yes, part of it is the purity of it that makes it that way. But if it releases that dopamine, that's the key to it. So, take the drug, THC, bring it into the brain. And when THC enters the brain, there are certain, and you take an MRI about 15 minutes after marijuana gets into a human brain, there's certain areas of the brain on the MRI that just really light up and get activated. They're called cannabinoid sites. For whatever reason in the brain, there are places in the brain that really react to this tetrahydrocannabinol. And so you got a place here, 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 the three big ones. There's a little one here, the hypothalamus. That lights up and people get hungry. That's what gives them the munchies, and I think also has some medicinal value for marijuana. There's another place here called the amygdala that I'm not going to get into tonight, but there's three main places here. This place we already looked at. This is the nucleus accumbens. This has to get activated for whatever, if the drug is to work for somebody, it's got to release dopamine here. But the one that got me into this stuff, and really when I first came here in 1971, 1972, I would have kids that would come up to me and say, Mr. Cantor, can I get into your math class after lunch? Because if I can get into your math class after lunch, I can smoke a doobie over lunchtime and I can learn better. I'd say you can learn better on marijuana? Absolutely. So here's what's going on. This place here is called the hippocampus. And here's what the hippocampus does normally. It is totally key to learning. It is part of the educational system. This is what it's about. I'm going to draw this over here, and I'm going to call it long-term memory. But it's really all your experience and your knowledge and all the things that you know, and it's all throughout the brain. Okay? What the hippocampus does is some very important things. First, it's like the search engine on a computer that's open to all the memory banks all the time, and whatever you're working on at that moment, it brings up exactly what you need to know. So for instance, if and this is not the thinking part of the brain. This is deeper parts of the brain here, okay? So you're talking with a friend, having a good time, it's lunchtime, and you go and you reach into your lunch bag and you pull out an apple and you take a bite out of the apple. And, you know, while you're having your conversation. If you bit into the apple, and the apple tasted like a banana, you would be shocked. You would stop what you're doing and go, what the heck is going on here, right? And the reason that you would is because your hippocampus, that's paying attention to all this stuff, is saying, oh, we're about to have an apple. What kind of apple are we going to have here? We're going to have a yellow apple, a red apple, a green apple? Oh, it's a green apple. Cool. Is it a Pippin? Is it a Granny Smith? We're pulling up all of our apple knowledge here, right? So that when we go to take a bite, our hippocampus has prepared us already with all the information we need to know. Just like right now when I'm teaching about marijuana, everyone has some information, some more than others, about marijuana, okay? You're bringing all that up here. That's part of what happens. If I'm teaching math, and I'm teaching 6th, 7th grade math, and I'm teaching about 50%. And I say, okay, class, we're going to learn about 50%. What I expect the brains in the class to do is the hippocampus says, aha, okay, I know what a fraction is. I've learned about fractions. So I bring that up. I know what a half is. And I learned about decimals. I'm going to bring up all the information that I have about decimals. And if that information is pretty solid, and they learned about fractions and decimals, and now the teacher starts teaching about 50%, if it all works well, what happens then is the hippocampus says, that's great, I learned something new. I learned about 50%. So it takes the new information and puts it into long-term memory. So it pulls stuff out of long-term memory and puts stuff into long-term memory. It does another thing too, which is that, and this is all unconscious, it also makes a decision to trash information. It says, I'm not going to remember that, I'm going to throw it away. And 99% of the information that's coming into our brain is thrown away. You don't need it. You don't need to know how many cars you saw today. The people who you saw in the room, you don't need to remember what they're wearing. But what it's doing all the time is discriminating from here to, I'm only going to remember stuff that's important to me. Make sense? Okay, so this gets whacked by marijuana, and it doesn't work very well. So the first thing it doesn't do is it doesn't pull up off of long-term memory very well. Now, if it doesn't pull up off of long-term memory very well, this is what the experience is. It's a very interesting experience. I go to take a bite out of the apple, but this time I'm high on marijuana. If I take a bite out of the apple, I go, oh my goodness, I may have had 5,000 apples in my life, but you got to taste this apple. Because somehow or other, this apple tastes special. It's almost like I didn't have an apple before. It's like eating an apple for the first time. I listen to a piece of music that I've heard 100 times before, but all of a sudden I'm high on marijuana, and it seems like I'm listening to the piece of music for the first time. I walk into a room, whatever the experience is, all of a sudden it feels like it's fresh and new. This is why artists will say, I get more creative. I'm thinking outside the box. You're darn right you're thinking outside the box. What I say to kids is that when you were little, you were looking at ants because you didn't know about ants, then at some point you were done with ants, right? However, get high on marijuana, you might go, oh my goodness, look at the ants. I never really looked at it before. It's not doing anything to the senses. What it's doing is whacking this hippocampus, so all of a sudden, life takes on a kind of fresh new glow. It's kind of like when Buddhism, when we talk about a Zen mind, beginner's mind. All of a sudden, I'm back to Zen mind, beginner's mind, and things become kind of fascinating. Make sense? Second piece is, oh boy, that's great. I never really thought about that before. And you get all these new thoughts because you're thinking outside the box. And then what you might say is, what was I talking about? I know I was talking about something really, I just forgot what it was. It also doesn't put things into long-term memory very well either. Not only that, you have trouble distinguishing between what's important and what isn't. So if you were sitting out here, you were high on marijuana right now, you might be tripping on my shirt and thinking, boy, look at, you know, it's hard to make the distinction between what's important and what isn't. Things seem fresh and new, and it all just kind of stays here for a while you're high. And if it was just that, I could walk away and say, that's fine. My concern with it is, after the 2 or 3 hours are done, the hippocampus does not come back to full working order. As a matter of fact, if you urinate in a cup, which most of you have not had to do. I work with Alameda County Office of Education. I work with juvenile justice system. Those kids know when they go to probation, they got to pee in a cup, and they do a urine analysis test. The drug that stays in your system the longest is marijuana. Cocaine, alcohol, heroin, whatever the drug, does the thing in your brain. It then goes through your liver. This is why the liver really gets so damaged by so many of these drugs. The liver filters it out. Then goes into the kidneys, it filters it out more, goes into your bladder, and you urinate it out. So you get a clean urine analysis test in 24, 36 hours. With marijuana, it's about 3.5 days. It stays in that fatty tissue, and this tissue is the fattiest tissue of all. It needs food all the time, okay? So it takes quite a while for this to clear out of the brain, okay? And this is of an issue for me when I'm teaching and I'm teaching somebody in school. And I'll tell you something, if a kid is smoking marijuana 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, then before that marijuana goes out of the system, more comes in. Before that goes out, more comes in. Before that goes out, more comes in. And it begins to build up in the brain so that if you do that for 3 or 4 or 5 months, you don't come up with a clean urine analysis test for 30 to 45 days. So it takes a while for this brain to come back. It takes a while for this to really sort itself out. I want to teach people that this is crucial in terms of learning. Marijuana interferes with learning. And it